Fitch downgrading Portugal's debt rating. We're going to take you right now to Portugal. Actually, Jim Silver, who is reporting from Lisbon, joining us on the phone. So, Jim, we can't be too surprised, right, by this move from Fitch. Just put it in context for us. I mean, essentially, it follows what one of Fitch's larger competitors did a few months back, no?
That's right. S&P lowered Portugal back in January to A+ from AA-. Yes.
I was just going to say, you know, we're seeing a lot of reaction in the currency market, but I'm wondering what people there in Lisbon are talking about what impact this could have on the economy.
All right. Well, we don't have a lot of reaction just yet from the government. I'm sure there will be tomorrow because the Parliament is debating the Stability and Growth Plan, the multi-year plan for budget deficit reduction that they have to submit to the European Union. And the government, which doesn't have a majority in Parliament, is still trying to either round up support or at least convince the opposition parties to abstain to get that through. So there's some sort of political stability issues there. And in general, there's sort of skepticism among economists here and abroad that Portugal can get economic growth going. What Fitch said is that they're not so much criticizing the budget plan itself. They just have doubts about Portugal's ability to get its economy growing. It's been very stagnant for about a decade now, unlike neighboring Spain, for instance. So,
Jim, this is Scarlet in New York. You mentioned that the S&P cut Portugal's credit rating in January. We know that the global sentiment around the PIG nations has been worsening, but what specifically has changed for Portugal since January?
Well, since January, I guess I'm not sure if it was right after the S&P rating. It was in January that Portugal introduced its 2010 deficit outlook. And what surprised a lot of people at the time was their figure for 2009. It came in at the deficit they reported was 9.3% of GDP, and that was higher than a lot of people were expecting. And they're promising to get it down to just 8.3% in 2010. A somewhat modest start to their deficit reduction plans. I think a lot of people were thrown off at the time by the 2009 coming in higher than they were expecting.
Jim, just out of curiosity, I mean, I know you said the government hasn't issued a statement yet, but have they felt that it is a fair or unfair? Scarlet just alluded to this term, PIGs. We know some Wall Street firms have actually banned their research teams from using the term. But what is tone on the ground? I mean, does Portugal consider itself at risk?
Well, Portugal is very anxious to tell anybody who will listen that they're not Greece. That's a message they keep repeating. The other thing that they point out is that
on what grounds, Jim?
Well, Greece has a deficit several points higher. I think it's 12.7. I think Portugal's again was 9.3, getting on to 8.3. So I think S&P and Fitch have both said that Portugal is a country which, if it doesn't get its house in order, could evolve to a Greece-like situation down the road, but it is not yet in that kind of a situation. And I think the other argument that Portugal makes is that this government came into office in 2005 with a deficit of over 6%. At the time, it was the highest in the Eurozone. They got it down to under 3% in a few years, and then once the worldwide crisis happened, everything spun out of control. So they said, well, we did it before, we can do it again, but of course the task is much bigger this time.
Jim, you mentioned Greece. How much are Portuguese leaders paying attention to what's going on with Greece, with the dispute within the EU about how to address the Greek credit crisis, and how are they factoring that into what they do with their economic finances?
Well, I mean, just as Greece says, Greece's official line is they're not asking for aid. I guess Portugal, even more so, says, well, we don't need any aid. And I think their argument is that they can get their house in order on their own.
Okay, Jim Silver, thanks very much. Jim Silver joining us there on the phone from Lisbon, Portugal.